The age-old question. How long do I age my wine for? How long is wine even good for? And what is the proper way to store my wine? We're going to be answering those and so many other questions concerning aging and storing of wine. Also, we're going to be taking a little sip of some wine out of the Niagara region that's made from a fruit that isn't a grape. All that and so much more on this episode of The Average Wine Enthusiast. Hi there, everybody. My name's Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Welcome. I hope you got a glass in your hand and you're enjoying something refreshing or something yummy. On this show, I thought I would answer a couple questions about the aging of wine, and I'd also like to talk a little bit about a wine that is made from a fruit that is not a grape. This wine was given to me, and I thought it would be a great idea to taste it right on the show. The guy who gave it to me also thought it would be a good idea. So we'll do that in a little bit. First, aging of wine in the bottle. Well, before I get to that, there is aging of wine before it gets in the bottle. And depending on what the wine is and what the varietal is, there'll be a certain amount of aging before that wine will get into a bottle. But there is some confusion, I would say, or some folks who just don't know about aging wine in a bottle. It is probably one of the most asked questions I get. Just this past weekend here, we opened up in Ontario, and I had a little bit of a vertical tasting, just a few folks in my backyard, staying safe and all that kind of stuff. And we drank 2013, 2014, 2015 of some Bella Terra Cabernet Franc, and it was delicious. So questions about aging came up then. Also, other folks that just asked me in general about aging and how long I can age a wine and how long is a wine good for, and all these types of questions. Well, first and foremost, it all depends on how the wine was made, what the varietal is, the quality of the grapes that went into the wine itself. But a lot of those questions can be answered by one, tasting the wine, and then of course you would have to go buy another bottle, have access to it, or you're at a tasting room, and then you would know the quality of the wine just by tasting it. Also, the price should give it away as well. Aging a $11, that would be an $11 bottle of wine, probably isn't a good idea unless you're going to age it for a couple of weeks or till the end of summer anyway. So the price is a pretty good indication of whether that wine is going to stand the test of time. Now, when a winemaker makes a wine, they have in mind whether it's going to be a wine that is going to be cellarable or not. So they'll make it a very specific way, and oftentimes the way they make it will dictate the price as well. So they'll make it a specific way. If you're a winemaker for, let's say, Peller Estates or Jackson Triggs or one of the bigger Canadian brands out there, you're making lots and lots of wine. You're making thousands of cases of the same wine. You want to be moving that wine. You want to be selling it, and you want to be selling lots of it. Those folks are not interested in, the people who buy that wine aren't interested in cellaring that wine that they buy, because it's probably relatively inexpensive. It's just the whole concept of scale. You make a lot of something, you can sell it for a lot less money. What is the average time period that the average bottle of wine is aged after it's purchased, either at a winery or at the liquor store? Any guesses out there? That's right, 1 day. Most people, the vast majority of people who buy wine are going to be drinking that wine in a very short period of time. If you're buying a wine from a winery, let's say, or the special section of your wine store, in Ontario here we have the LCBO, they have the vintages section. And if you're buying stuff in there, then you're the kind of person who is looking for a wine that you may be able to keep for a few years. But for the most part, the average dude or dudess is buying a wine. She or he is buying that wine to drink that, in this weekend or for dinner tonight or whatever. So you get the idea as far as aging goes, that it's not a big deal for most people. But if you're interested in aging wine, and those folks who were lucky enough to be here to enjoy this little vertical that we had, it was my first vertical that I had ever tried. They were wondering, how do you know that 2013 is still good? The grapes were picked 8 years ago. Like, how do we know that this wine is still good? And I gave you many of the criteria there, whether you know that's going to be a good wine or not. So just based on my experience, the aging of wine kind of goes like this. There are bottles of wine out there, red bottles of wine, that you should drink within the first to 3 years of the vintage of the wine in the bottle. But a big chunk of wine that is sold, big chunk of red wine that is sold, can last 3 to 5 years. So a lot of the wine that is made, you can cellar that for 3 to 5 years, or it should be drank within 3 to 5 years after the vintage of the wine itself. So that is, like I say, the vast majority of wine is in that category, because it's a great price point that wine can be made that can last that long and keep all the. Well, a good question would be, how do you know when wine is not at its prime anymore? Well, one of the big things is the acidity in the wine. If you have a decent red wine, there'll be some acid in it, or some acidity in it. And that acid is part of what holds the structure of the body or of the wine together. It also is part of what makes up the body of the wine, as well as the tannins, which you find from the skins of red wine grapes, I should say. So those things, that the body, the acid, the tannins, as time goes on, those things will decrease in strength. And then the wine will, start to decrease. Sometimes that decrease is gradual, and sometimes it falls off a cliff, and it's just no good anymore. So, like I say, the vast majority of the wine is in that 3 to 5 year category. You know what I'm going to do right at this moment in time? I am going to pour myself a little sip of some Mayhem Rosé, the 2020 Rosé, just recently released. If you've never heard of Mayhem, they're a winery out of the Okanagan Valley, and they make a delicious rosé made from 95% Merlot and 4.5% Cab Franc. And this is made the Sangny method. They call it, and the grapes are also foot stomped. Foot stomping wine. Well, so delicious rosé coming out of the Okanagan Valley from Mayhem. There was 147 cases of this stuff made. That is not a lot of cases of wine. It's not many bottles either. 12 times 147, do the math, and get back to me. So I'm going to take a sip of this fine Mayhem rosé. To wet my whistle. Okay. Look for that stuff on the internet. You'll find it. And if you're wise and you like rosé, you'd scoop some up. So the next group of next years of wine is the 3 to 7 year old wine. 7 years after the wine was made, the wine still holds up. Still has, still, if it was fruit forward to begin with, or it was really minerally or mossy, it'll still have that. Mainly, though, it'll have that acidity that I talked about, and the tannins will still be nice and well, in 7 years, they won't be nice and tight and grippy, but they should be noticeable to your palate. So how much wine out there is 3 to 7? There's a good chunk of wine that is in that group, and that's the wine that I would say that I gravitate towards. 1, it's in my budget. 2, when it gets to that magical 3 or 5, 6, 7-year-old vintage, that's when you can really enjoy aspects of a wine that you can't enjoy in any other situation. And right now, that's where I'm at right now, where I'm loving drinking 5, 6, 7-year-old wine. Will you pay $11 for a bottle of wine that'll last 7 years? Probably not. So yes, you do have to spend a little bit more money, but not a lot more money. And that's the philosophy of the average wine enthusiast, is to get some decent wine at a reasonable price. And then there is the category that I have some bottles in this category, and those are the wines that only are good after 5 years. Yeah, they taste fine. The tannins are wickedly grippy, and you won't get those flavors that you would get after those 5 years. And when you get to that 10th year, if it's that kind of wine that it made it to that 10th year, you're in for a real treat. Of course, you're going to pay a little bit more money for these types of wines, but it usually is worth it. And if it's a special occasion that you're opening these wines for, well then it's even more worth it. I have a bottle of wine that someone gave me from the Corazon winery. It's Barry. Thanks, Barry. You're the best. He gave me this bottle, and on the cork, is a sticker that says 2023 to 2050. That's the window that I have to drink this wine. And what's the vintage of this wine? It's a 2011. So the wine has to be 12 years old before the winemaker thinks the wine has come into its own. But I can wait for another 26 years after the vintage to drink it and still enjoy the wine. And of course, there's other wines out there that can age a relatively long period of time based on how the winemaker made the wine, the quality of the grapes coming in, and a whole lot of other voodoo that goes into to aging wine. Just before I go on the aging aspect, I had a question, or it was a remark someone made saying that people thought that if they kept the wine in the bottle too long, the wine would go bad. And that's true, depending on what kind of wine it was and how long you left it in there. It could turn to vinegar, and that happens every once in a while, sometimes prematurely because too much air got in there, it got corked, or there's certain reasons for that. But I suspect, based on where the remark was coming from, that people are storing their wine in not ideal conditions. So you buy a bottle of wine, or you buy a case of wine, and you throw it in one of those, buffets that you put in your dining room. It's got the glass cabinets on either side, and in the middle you can put whatever, 24, 30 bottles in the middle. And that's where they keep their wine. Not a good idea, because in a lot of cases, some of that wine will end up sitting in that case, in that buffet, for 1 or 2 years. What happens in the course of any year, especially here in southern Ontario, is that you're going to have different heating and cooling conditions for one. So when it's days like today outside, I have the AC on in my house right now because it's wicked muggy. It's in the high 80s, and you want the air conditioning on. You want to be comfortable to sleep. I'm going to take another sip of this fine Mayhem Rosé. Yummy. So what you have is this wine sitting out in the AC, which is, that's cool conditions are good, right? But then in those months where you don't put your AC on, there is a usually in this neck of the woods, like I say, there is a big transition in temperature. So at night it could go down into the low 50s, and in the daytime you could get up to 75. I wouldn't put on my air conditioning in that scenario. I'd leave all my windows open and get some fresh air. So those big gradations of temperature, they wreak havoc on wine. Those are not the conditions you want your wine to go through, let alone on a daily basis for months at a time. So that's not good, let alone the fact that a dining room is often hit by sunlight at some point during the day. And then it goes, at night it gets dark. And then it gets light, and then it gets dark. That is another horrible thing to do to your wine, is to expose it to light for any given period of time. If you can put it in a closet, that's the best place. So the only light it gets is when the door of the closet is open. And then your wine is safe. But if you're putting it in one of these buffets, you're just asking for trouble. Don't leave your wine out to store it. And leaving it in one of these buffets, I think it's like a wine crime to even have this furniture. It looks great, you got these bottles of wine sitting in, in this little piece of furniture that's sitting in your dining room with all your stemware up there. It looks great, but your wine is suffering. The main thing being the gradation, the temperature differences that it suffers. And then in the wintertime, you pump up your thermostat to whatever. Some people get out of hand. But then again, the thermostat lets go, and the temperature is constantly raising and lowering in any given house. So if you can put it in a place where there isn't temperature control on it, and it's dark, that's the best scenario. So yes, wine can go bad in a bottle quicker if you got it in bad storage conditions. So I guess that's going to be it on the aging aspect of wine. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. Let's get to the yummy alternative to grapes wine. This wine here was given to me, like I said. These people visited this winery. It's called Sunnybrook Farms. What is that? That's from a movie that Shirley Temple was in, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, this wine here is made using pears. This is pear wine. And let me read a little bit of the label here. Crafted from locally grown Bosc pears, this full-bodied wine, can't wait to test it out, offers an enticing bouquet of caramelized pears, layered with soft hints of honey and vanilla. Enjoy with glazed ham, roast chicken, or your favorite cheese palette. Serve slightly chilled. This is definitely slightly chilled. I took this out of the refrigerator about half an hour ago. The bottle is cold to the touch, and it's still sweaty. So I'm going to pour myself a glass of this, and not a glass. I'm going to pour myself a sip of this. I know that this Sunnybrook makes other fruit wines as well, like berry wines, like strawberry wine, or I don't remember exactly, because my friend wanted to gift me with more of their wine from Sunnybrook, but not knowing what it is, I kiboshed that idea. And if I really love this stuff, I'm going to take a trip to the Niagara area sometime in the very near future as Ontario opens up here. We're going to be doing some traveling, folks. Battling it out on the highways. So, what do they think? Their aromas coming out of that again? Caramelized pears. Caramelized pears. Have I ever had a caramelized pear? maybe once or twice in a dessert. Caramelized pear, what do I think of? I think of pear pie. That's what I think of. That could be pear pie. A baked good of some kind, like a Danish. Yeah, Danish. Pear Danish. Not bad at all. I don't smell any vanilla. Oh no, the vanilla was on the palate. Soft hints of honey. I don't know. Let's give this a whirl. I'm kind of scared. Ooh. Okay, so that's made from a pear, eh? All right, so it says it's full-bodied. I'll tell you what it is. It's as sweet as candy. It's sweet as grandma. Man, oh man, that's sweet. Full-bodied? It's not. This is not a full-bodied nothing. An analogy that I like to use when I think of body, I just kind of came up with this in my head, and I passed it along to the folks who we were having the vertical with. When I drink something that has no body, let's say a glass of lemonade or an iced tea maybe, I think of it as a very thin layer of liquid passing over my palate. And it's refreshing because of the temperature, might have a little sweetness on it. But when I think of something that has body, and the thing that gives wine body is the tannins and the acidity within the wine itself. And so that makes it kind of thicker. It's like it kind of has a thicker mass that goes over your palate. That's the way I look at body. And sometimes the tannins are just they're just pulling at your palate on the top and the bottom because it's getting crammed down your palate. It feels like sometimes there's so much body in some wines. But this wine here, having said that it is full-bodied, I'm going to go with no. And what is the alcohol in here? You know, I can actually, the aftertaste that I'm getting from this is boozy. And it's only 12.2. Yeah, that is something that I would consider maybe mixing with something else, maybe making a sangria out of it, possibly. That might be nice. Yeah, throw some grapes and some strawberries and some other fruit and some of this stuff in there. Maybe mix it with another type of wine, a Merlot or something. Do a little bit of home blending, as it were. But the way it sits right now, that is just one sweet mess. But I suppose there are some people who really like this style of wine. But I have to think that with all that sugar in there, if you drink too much of it, you may get a headache. I think. It's too much sugar. I can handle a fair amount of residual sugar in some wines, a Chianti or something like that. But this is just downright sweet. Not to put it down or anything, but it is not full-bodied, and it does say full-bodied on the bottle. And what is the year on this? 2017. So yeah, maybe it's past its prime, and it has lost much of its acidity in the last 4 years-ish, 3.5 years, since these pears were picked. So, the harvest season is obviously a little different when it comes to alternative fruits and the vintage of the wine itself. But there you go, Sunnybrook Bosc Pear Wine out of Niagara. From Sunnybrook Farm Estate Winery. All right, I guess that's going to do it for this episode. I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and I would love to thank the Big Organ Trio for letting me use their music on the show. If you have any comments, leave them down below. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. It would help me out a lot. And if you have friends who are like you, who watch wine videos on YouTube, let them know about the Average Wine Enthusiast. I would really appreciate that as well. Until next time, everybody, my name is Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Salute!